complex mortgage world, finding the right direction can be challenging. That's where Lighthouse Advisors comes in. With over 25 years of experience, we provide fractional leadership and executive oversight, guiding companies through transitions, growth, and innovation. From IMBs to brokers to credit unions to tech firms, our team of seasoned professionals is here to shine a light on solutions, ensuring your business thrives in every environment. At Lighthouse Advisors, we don't just guide, we empower. Together, let's create a ripple of success across the industry. Email us today at laura@lighthouseadvisors.com.
Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Illuminating Solutions. I'm Laura Brandeo, CEO of Lighthouse Advisors, and today we are joined by the incredible Robin Lukason. She is one of our fractional executives and an operational and change management expert at Lighthouse Advisors. Robin, we're going to dive right in here. Okay. You've had extensive experience leading operations team and now focusing on coaching leaders to build meaningful relationships. Can you share with us? We'd love to hear a time when emotional intelligence played a pivotal role in your leadership, and how did that affect your team's success?
Well, when you say extensive, that makes me feel pretty old. So back when I started, emotional intelligence, I don't even think was a word. I think we looked at it very differently about how do you motivate people. And I think back to easily my first year in management. So the very first promotion you get when you now are not a peer, you are managing your peers. And at my age, I was 23 when that happened. That was my first promotion. So I learned very quickly what I needed to do, because trying to create a new boundary, trying to create some level of authority was definitely a challenge, and trying to earn respect now as someone that used to be their peer. So to give you a specific example, this was probably my very first refi boom. I think it was Thanksgiving weekend. And we were about to do as much volume in a weekend as we had ever done in a month.
Wow.
And I'd been in this role, I think, 6 months. And we were in a position where we were going to have people come in over the weekend. There was no way we could prep all the wires in time. And when you sit at your desk and you look at all of this work to do, and you know people are expecting to spend the time with their families and they don't want to be in the office, it was pure panic for me. So I went and got a couple of our sales leaders, one of whom is pretty well known in the industry, Mr. Brian View. And I asked him if he would come just have some presence with 2 other sales leaders with me, because what I decided to do was appeal to the idea that as individuals, we will all be better as a team if we can all just do our little part, which is a theme I think that's in any successful team. And I was able to dig into my data and break it down that I just needed everybody on the team to give me 4 hours. That's it. And obviously Thanksgiving Day was not the option. It would be the Friday after, or Saturday or Sunday. And if everybody could give me 4 hours, we would have everything prepped for Monday morning. So none of our customers would not have the funds ready at the table. And I think trying to instill in them why this was so important, appeal to the idea of, if everybody just does this little part, this is how we're going to succeed as a team. And then I had brought in the brawn, to stand there and help, witness it. And it was a piece of cake.
Oh, that's awesome.
Everybody said, of course, we will do it.
Yep.
I was so, that feeling of when your heart's just beating so fast and you have to pull the team together, in front of the room, and 25 people are standing around you like, what does she want to say now?
Yeah.
And thankfully, it worked. And I think that was my first real lesson in learning. And I'm not by nature authoritative. I'm much more collaborative in style. But I thought, I don't want to dictate. I don't feel like I'm going to get very far if I tell people what to do.
Yeah.
I was asking for their help.
Yeah. And I feel that goes so much farther. I mean, we all know, right? And it's funny. I had a similar experience, and it was 4th of July. Like I remember, but I can bring myself back to that moment because I remember that fear that you had where people were supposed to have the day off and you had to ask them, for that help. But that is such a great example of if you break it down, you do your homework, you have your numbers, and you collectively do it as a team. It's actually now my memory of that now is a very happy memory because I remember the team all coming together. We, of course, and I'm sure the same thing with you successfully did it. You took care of all those families. Everyone was happy. And it was a moment that you looked back on, right, with your team as this was a win. This was us coming together. So what a great example of the value of that emotional intelligence and that leadership. Thank you for that. That was great. Okay. So going into, and you even started it with that example of how you analyze the numbers. So I know that in your career, you've developed reporting tools and capacity models to improve business performance. What advice do you give to clients looking to optimize their strategic planning process? And how can they effectively use data and performance metrics to make those better and drive those decisions that they're making?
I mean, part of any successful strategic plan has goals, and there are goals defined by data points, elements, right? We talk about SMART goals, things that are specific, measurable. That has to be included in a roadmap of where you want to go. But not everybody has the talent to build them. A lot of people aren't all that interested in the mechanics behind them, and simple tools are really needed. But I will say this. First, you have to know your numbers. There's just no other way to run a business and be successful without knowing what's going on. Now, numbers only tell part of the story. It's the initial indicators. It might be the things that tell you it needs to take a deeper dive. It may be something where you need to give congratulations because there are people and stories behind all of the data also. So I always say it's a starting point. It's not the only point. But creating a culture that relies on and uses data, I think, is also an important piece for this to be successful in an organization. Because if you've got one leader that looks at data every day and nobody else on the team is interested, it's going to feel really tyrannical when someone's always like beating on your door, like, what's going on with these results? Or you feel like you're in the dark because you don't get to see the good stuff. So you have to teach your team to look at what you're looking at in the view that's important to them. So similar to the example I shared about emotional intelligence, everybody needs to know their little view of the world, and they need to know how to change it. So if the metric is here and it needs to be here, what are the steps they need to take? What are the levers they pull? What are the changes they make? How do they look at their pipelines? How do they look at, the things they're doing in their daily business to get those numbers to move? It has to be part of the culture. And I would say this, sometimes it is very important to be looking at a lot of pieces, and other times it's maybe just key performance indicators. I mean, my strategy was always like, data is like my morning coffee. It's part of my morning routine. It's the first thing I do when I got into the office, or the first report I might look at from my bed on my phone as, technology got better. But I didn't do it all day long. And I would also say that sometimes there are trends hidden that you can't see. So as a good leader, it is really important to also do deep dives with your team. If you're an SVP and EVP, you're not looking at the frontline stats necessarily, unless you've got some pretty chart where you can just see like who are the bottom 5 people. It's really important to do some deep dives with the team members so you can dig into their teams together, because that's where you're going to find the nuts and bolts of who's really performing, who's not, what changes do we need to make. And ideally, your team members start to do that on their own, so they will come to you with the information. So here's who's not performing. Here's what we're going to do about it. The best thing I teach young leaders is learn to anticipate your manager. So what's important to them, I would hope they would convey why it's important, and then they teach their team so that there is better synergy. And I think Staff also likes to see how they're performing. So I talk about it as a culture of the leadership and even, even as low as team leaders understanding how their teams are performing. But individuals like to know also, especially the ones that are really competitive and top performers. And I've worked in companies where they sort of suppress information. It's not easily accessible to the staff. Like they have to wait for someone to hand it to them. And I don't think that's the right culture. I feel like it should be available to anybody that wants to see their results. They want to compare themselves to their peers. And obviously, the things that are HR sensitive, we're very careful about that. But I think you build an entire culture that understands it has a place. It's not the only thing, but it's an important thing.
100%. And it's funny that you even said about that whole morning. You and I were having a conversation about how when I'm in the West Coast, I still work East Coast. That has always been my morning routine. One of the first things I do is I look at the numbers. It's the most important thing we can do as business leaders. And for everyone listening to this, if that is not how you have your organization set up, Robin is someone that can come in and she can not only show you that, she can show you from the top all the way down, because so many times you do have the top executives looking at numbers, but to Robin's point, maybe it needs to go a little deeper. And then we say, well, here's access to Power BI. Go to town. It's not that simple. You have to know what you're looking at. You have to know why it's important. And then you have to know what do you do with the information that you're looking at. So it's not just the data. It's so many layers that go beyond that. And that's where Robin's expertise comes in, to really not only just knowing the numbers, but then all those other components. So thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Can I add one thing?
Of course.
I was going to say that my love of data really developed when I didn't have all the tools I needed to manage my business. So I started playing around. This is how I got proficient at Excel. And then I started to teach other people. And then it morphed into a whole new job where I started to understand SQL. Now I can't type code, but I can read it. And some people started to give me access where I could make element changes to run new reports out of the database. And that really evolved into learning how to be the hybrid between the technicians and what we call like the true business intelligence analysts, the ones that build, and the business. Very few people can talk each other's language.
That's called the unicorn.
Yeah. So I learned how to be the business person explaining to BI what we need. BI started to understand what was happening in the business. And then I ended up creating a job for myself because it allowed me to work on the business while the leaders worked in the business. I could develop the tools with BI, bring them to the business fully tested because I know what the reports were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then it was a matter of teaching people, how do we use them? Where are they stored?
Yeah, you were able to communicate it effectively. Yep. Exactly. And that is the reason why Robin is an expert in that area. Okay, so to wrap us up, you've led successful technology integrations and operational standardization throughout your career. What are some key challenges that companies face when trying to implement these process improvements? And how do you guide them to ensure that those changes are effective?
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I've been through at least 5 or 7 in major companies, once or twice as a participant, and then other times leading them or being a co-spearhead. I think number one are what are the goals with why we are selecting this product? Why is this technology important? What is it going to do for us? Because the obvious answer is change is scary. People don't like it. They like to do things the way they've always done them. Even if they don't work, they're comfortable. So what does this new system give us? Is it going to make us faster? We can have 4 people in the system at the same time. Why is that a good thing? Does it automate things we do manually? How much time does it save us? Do we close more loans? Do we get paid more? Like, what are the goals? And then you have to get the people on board. I think the biggest challenge I always see is the top of the house decides the technology we want to use. but nobody on the front lines has even seen it. So how is that decision made? People that make the decisions are most disconnected from the process. And that's an ego thing, right? We want to think that we know what's going on because we talk to our people, but we don't really know when we're not in it day to day. So having a core group of people, which I realize there's a confidentiality aspect here, bringing them in to look at things and help you assess it as opposed to just an executive team is something that I wish more companies did from the beginning. So you get people on board at the ground level. I think that's number one. I think number two, once you have this buy-in, we'll say you've got your change agents throughout the organization who can help tout the praises of why this is going to be a good system. You have to be realistic about there's going to be bumps in the road. Things are going to take longer than we expect. Things aren't going to work the way we want necessarily. And productivity is going to drop initially. Like all the things you used to do quickly as you start to adopt it will take a while, but anything with practice gets better. And I think the third piece is people need to listen. And I mean the people that make the decisions at the tech firm and in executive leadership. If you're hearing noise and you are regularly engaging with people that are working to build the specs, test the system, and you're hearing things about challenges, there needs to be a timeout. We need to stop and listen and understand what the challenge is and collaborate to solve it, not just, well, this is how it's built, this is what we're going to do. That's where the wheels start to fall off and people become disengaged. And I'm not saying we can solve everything in every way. And of course, there's time and money involved. So those are two variables that there may not always be a lot of flexibility. And sometimes it might be like a phase 2 thing or a phase 3. But I think you want your staff to feel better using a better system that's going to create more productivity, ideally, better speed and better experience for the customer. Then we really need to listen as we go through the process. And then, of course, back to your question a few minutes ago, got to have the great metrics to measure so you can see, are we really performing better in this new system? Do we have better visibility? Is it giving us the results we had hoped for when we decided to sign up for this system?
I love that. Love that. So important. Have to have those change agents as part of it. Absolutely. Robin, thank you so much for sharing your insights and sharing your expertise with all of us to illuminate solutions for our industry. For everyone out there, if you're interested in learning more about what Robin can do for your organizations, just email discovery@lighthouseadvisors.com and we will connect the two of you together so that you can have those discussions. Robin, thank you so much and keep shining brightly.
Thank you.